Hey everyone, I am CCP Estimate, a relatively new employee at CCP, only been here for 3 months. But yeah, I'm definitely part of the 64% that Hilmar mentioned yesterday, but I'm not new to EVEOnline. I've been playing for the past 17 years, on and off. And I usually try and follow the discussion that's going on Reddit and the forums. And yeah, maybe put up the next slide. And one of the main discussions there has been the DPS system. So I thought I would investigate that a little bit and show you some statistics on it. So with the main question, did the DPS, or dynamic bounty system, ruin nullsec ratting? So here we have a graph showing the total daily bounty generated across all of EVE. We can immediately see the drop that happened during the blackout period, where we saw a 4-fold decrease in the total bounty generated. It recovered quite quickly, but not exactly to the levels it was before. And then we had the dynamic bounty system period, where it dropped again nearly 50%. So if we just look at this graph, we can conclude that the dynamic bounty system did indeed reduce total bounty by a lot, and maybe even ruined ratting. But if we give ourselves a little bit more historical context, we can see that the total amount of bounty that's been generated in EVEOnline now is just the same as it was during the period 2012 to 2016. So this changes this perspective a bit. Maybe the period before the dynamic bounty system is the period of overpowered bounty in EVEOnline. But let's focus on a period after the blackout. So zoom in on that period. And in the middle of the time frame, we have the release of the DPS system. We can split this up even further by security band and see that most of the bounty is being generated in nullsec. The green area is showing nullsec, the red area is showing highsec, and the purple area is showing lowsec. What is interesting here is to see that we actually have some activity in lowsec now. After the release of the DPS system, we see a 3-fold increase in total bounty. Some of it is, of course, due to the fact that the bounty risk modifier is just increasing the total bounty. But if we look at the number of kills, or NPC kills in lowsec, that has increased by 30% in that period. But because the dynamic bounty system mostly affected nullsec, let's just focus on that. And let's look at how it's split now between the main banks, the main bank auto payments, which is the payment you get from the main bank if you're NPCing, and the thefts of the main bank. And we can see that main banks are not being robbed that much. In fact, the probability of your main bank being robbed is only about 5%. And now we also have a new risk source, which is the reserve banks. And those are sitting at 50 billion a day now. But this only covers the total bounty. What about the distribution in EVE? This graph shows all the systems. Each bubble there represents one system, and the size of the bubble is the amount of bounty that's generated within that system. This is pre-DPS. We can see that there are 2 sections within the universe that are responsible for most of the bounty generated. Now, if we take all these systems and split them equally in equal buckets of 100, from those systems that generate the lowest amount of bounty to those that generate the highest amount of bounty, we can see that the top 1% of systems, 33 systems, generated 12.4% of all the bounty. That's 250 billion a day for 33 systems. Now, after the release of the DPS system, we can actually see some activity in the bottom 50% of systems. But the top 1% is still quite high, at 11.7%. So it didn't drop the 1% that much. But the next 15% of systems, those were really affected by the DPS. Now, if we make this graph cumulative, in order to see how many systems we would need to generate as much bounty as the top 1%, we can see before the release of the DPS system, we would need the bottom 72% of systems to generate as much bounty as the 1%. But after the release, we are at 55%. Now I wanted to investigate this a little bit further. Here we're looking at how much bounty is being generated by security status of the system. I've adjusted for the number of systems within each bucket. And we can see that it's a downward slope there. And the main idea behind this graph is to try and gain some insight on how much better you're off in deep nullsec versus closer to lowsec. And we can see that you're about 10 times better off in deep nullsec. But if we look at what happens after the release of the DPS system, now you're about 2 to 3 times better off. Now, what is the correct factor here? I'm not sure, but 10 sounds a bit off. Now, so far, we have covered the total bounty and the distribution in the universe. What about the ship types affected by the DPS change? So here we have the Dominics, the total bounty generated by the Dominics. It has decreased or started decreasing prior to the DPS release, and we can see it was slightly affected by the DPS release, but not that much. Next, we have the rattlesnake. He was highly affected, and I wonder if people thought it was an over-investment, ratting in a rattlesnake. Next, there are the 2 carriers, the Thanatos and the Nidhugger. Those were both heavily affected by the DPS change. And then we have the super carriers. Those both saw a huge drop, both during the surgical strike patch, which was April 2020, and also during the DPS release. And then finally, we have the Gila and the Ishtar. And currently, Ishtar is generating about half of the bounty in nullsec, which I'm sure we would all like to see a little more diversity in the total in the ships used. But if we now transition this graph to see how many characters are behind this, so we transition it to total bounty per character per day. Here I'm trying to mimic something closely related to ISK per hour, but it's not ISK per hour, it's per character per day. We can see that the Hel and the Nyx, they had their bounty reduced by about 44% after the release of the DPS patch. And we can even see that the surgical strike patch, which we saw earlier that dropped both supercarriers by a lot, didn't really affect the ISK that it make, just the number of characters behind it. Then we have the Thanatos and the Nidhugger. Those both saw a 21% decrease, and the Ishtar saw about 11% decrease. Now, if we also consider it that there's less ISK to be made in the universe now, and the Ishtar as a proportion of the total ISK that is being generated, then the Ishtar is not worse off at the moment. Now, we can also look at the proportion of ISK generated by ship category. And I've increased the time frame a bit here. Now we're looking at all the way back to 2017. And we can see today, it's mostly just sub-capital ships that are generating the ISK. We got the super capitals, pre-DPS, which were about 28% of the total bounty generated by the super capitals. Now, more interestingly, during the blackout period, super capitals were responsible for 45% of the total ISK generation, which means that not all ships were affected equally during the blackout period. Which begs the question, were super capital pilots or super carrier pilots playing the game of low risk, high reward during that period? Or even during the period just before the release of the DPS system? Now we can also transition this graph to see how many characters are behind this. You can see that there are not that many characters behind the sub-capital group, but still they're generating most of this there before the release of the DPS patch. So if you summarize this, the effects of the DPS patch, the ISK dropped from 1.7 trillion a day to 1 trillion a day. And it's now at the same level as it was in 2012 till 2016. The ISK is now generated or it's more distributed across the universe. And those that were affected the most heavily by the DPS system are the supercapital pilots, while the subcapital pilots didn't really see that much effect. And low sec ratting seems to be a thing now. Now, to finish this section, I want to show some statistics on the ESS system. So here's the average auto payments from ESS. Here's the average main bank theft, sitting at 50 million. And this is the largest main bank theft so far, 1.7 billion. And the average reserve bank theft, similar amount. And then there is the largest auto payment. Someone managed to get 2.5 billion from an auto bank payment. And then the largest reserve bank theft at 10 billion. And then the amount that is currently in all reserve banks. Sitting at 50 trillion, estimated to be 77 trillion by the end of the year, for anyone to grab. Not exactly, you need the keys. But yeah, thank you everyone. Now I want to welcome CCP Bjorn on the stage to talk a little bit about you guys.
Very nice. Hello everyone. Do I have audio? Can you hear me? It's great to be here. Super happy to finally be here after the break. Fanfest has always been a highlight of for me working at CCP. And 3 years without Fanfest and 2 years without any events is a bit long, so super happy to be here. Now, a professional actress came to CCP before Fanfest and was like teaching us how to do these types of presentations. And she emphasized that it was very important to start big. So that's what I'm going to do. With a big ass 3D pie. It's also like a huge no-no in the analytical world to use pie charts, especially 3D pies. So it's been a bucket list item for me to be able to use this in a presentation for a long time. And, but it also illustrates the point nicely. You, the attendees at Fanfest 2022, make up roughly 0.3% of the active player base. When I pulled this data almost a week ago, you were standing at 831 players, 6,542 accounts, and 13,681 characters. It's a lot. So as I mentioned, you make up 0.3% of all currently active players, but you make up 0.9% of all active accounts, or like the accounts belonging to those active players rather, and 1.1% of all their characters. So as you can see, you have a lot more accounts on average, and you have a lot more characters than the average EVE player. 3.8 times more characters, in fact. Now, you have character members in 2% of all active player corporations, which is already kind of a lot. But you have character members in 13.4% of all active player alliances, which is staggering. And even more crazily, you have active character members in 29 out of the 30 largest alliances in EVEOnline. However, you don't exactly follow the overall membership trends to the letter. The orange line here represents the amounts of characters you have in each of these alliances, while the black bars underneath are the same as we had before. So Brave United and Pandemic Legion brought a disproportionate amount to Fanfest, which is awesome. Now, talking alliances, we got a special request to remake this graph. So here you go. The higher you go up on this graph, like each star on the graph indicates an alliance. The higher you go, the more total lock-on time on average the member of the alliance have. And the further right you go, the more alts each member has on average. And the size indicates the player amount in each alliance. Not the character count, but the player count. So you can let this sink in a little bit. And yeah, the orange ones are represented at Fanfest. The blues are not. Here is a similar graph, but showing very different things. Instead of alliances, each star here represents a player at Fanfest. The higher you go, the older the player is. The more further to the right you go, the more lock-on time you have on the most played character, on your most played character. So as you can see, you differ quite a lot. You are as different as you are many. And there are some quite staggering statistics in there. Alt counts and total playtime on the most played character. Now, here we see every character in EVEOnline that has more than 100 hours of active game time since 2012. It's the same graph really as before, except the axes have been flipped. So now, on the bottom axis, you have character age in years. On the y-axis, you have total lock-on hours for that character of active time again. And you are represented in orange. So you kind of follow the distribution, but still you can also make out that you are a little further up, like on the, you're in the higher echelons of players, definitely, when it comes to age and total lock-on time. So yeah, most of you have actually spent quite an astonishing amount of time playing EVE, both in terms of tenure or active lock-on time, or both. I remember when I reached 1,000 hours in a game I was playing, my friends actually threw me a party. It was such an achievement, and I'm not even kidding. I was probably also the first one to do it, and it was like a huge achievement. However, for 1,000 hours for you is more like a barrier to entry. And I would like to review some of your most played characters. Now, 71% of you have reached that 1,000 hour mark. 55% of you have more than 2,000 hours spent in the game. 22% of you have more than 5,000 hours. 9% have more than 7,500 hours of active playtime on your most played character. And 4.5% of you, or 38 players, have reached 10,000 hours of active game time on your most played character, which is often considered the amount of time you need to reach global expertise. You're like the very top of your field. 13 of you have 15,000 hours of active game time on your most played character. However, one absolute legend has spent a total of 23,776 active hours of game time, so removing idle log-on time, since 2012 on his most played character. And I think he deserves a round of applause. And perhaps a report to the security team as well. No, kidding. It's phenomenal. It's almost 2.7 years of active playtime since, like, in the last 10 years, which is crazy. Now, you have started out in EVE in almost every year since EVE came out. Some of you have been with us from the very beginning. and some are at their very beginning in EVE. We actually have 5 players at Fanfest that started out on the day EVE was launched. Yeah. May 6, 2003, 19 years ago. But we also have some new players, which still have a little ways to go towards their 1,000-hour party, but I hope you will be there for them to show them the ropes, welcome them into the game with open arms and loaded guns, like you only know how to. But yeah, to the fun stuff, pew pew and exploding spaceships. Since 2007, late 2007, Fanfest 2022 attendees have been involved in 2.5 million PvP kills. In 85% of those kills, you are the aggressing party. In 15% of those, you are the victims. And in 1.5, you are both. Which means that you guys, only the players at Fanfest, have killed each other 40,423 times. And you've potted each other 4,004 times. Which I would expect to be a little higher. It's like you're kind of nice to each other, just like, no, okay, job done, go. It's nice, it's very nice of you. Now, even more interestingly, in 10% of these 40,423 deaths, one or more of the attackers also belongs to the victim player. And, even more oddly, in 82% of those cases, the final blow is delivered by a character owned by the same player as owns the victim. And I have no idea what you're doing. Is it like insurance fraud? Are you practicing? Are you duking the DPS system? Like, I have no idea what you're doing. And like, what the fuck happened in 2020? Was this like, I don't know, very interesting. Now, since 2012, we're gonna shorten the time scale a little bit. You have killed 300,090, wow, this is a difficult number. 393,847 characters, distinct characters, belonging to 278,392 players, almost 1.8 million times over. Which means you have killed each character that has been killed by you has been killed 4.7 times on average. Some a lot more than others. I resisted the urge to include the character names, but some poor fella has been killed 2,400 twice by you. Seems excessive, guys. Seems a bit excessive. Now, you have destroyed stuff since 2012 worth 270 trillion ISK. And stuff worth 428 trillion has been dropped during PvP kills you've been involved in. Now, as just kind of to shape this, the average destruction value for EVE in its entirety per day is 1.1 trillion. So this is a lot. This is actually 8% of all total PvP-related destruction in EVE for the past 10 years. But you only make up 0.6% of the attacking characters, which is crazy. And only 0.4% of the attacking players. So it seems that some people just want to watch the world burn. Yes, indeed. You have way more kills than the average player, almost 8 times more, 8.4 times more. You also have way more deaths than the average player, 20 times that of an average player. Your KD ratio is still like 6, so you're fine, I would say. You tend to not go for low-value targets as much as the average player. You tend to go for higher value targets. And granted, these are not the most high value targets, but these are the categories where you differ the most from the overall. However, the kind of more staggering thing is, if you look at your percentage out of all the total kills per the highest value categories, you have killed 18% of all carriers destroyed in EVE for the past 10 years. 36% of all force auxiliaries, and you can see the other numbers. Perhaps most staggering is that you have killed 64% of all Titans in EVE for the past 10 years. You've been involved in the kills. And that is crazy to me. Now, I just want to sincerely thank you for all the activity you do in EVEOnline. It's because of you and every action you make in game that I get to come to work and I get to analyze some of the craziest and complex data sets there are. Your creativity and your crazy kind of shenanigans in game kind of continually blow my mind. I've been here for 10 years, and it kind of amazes me that I can get surprised by you guys and what you get up to still. So yeah, thank you very much again, and you can see all your beautiful faces as I leave. Thank you. Forgot one note. I'm going to let this run through. Please join us at the round table at 3, where we'll be discussing all and everything data-related, Excel for EVE, player-facing analytics, and questions regarding these presentations, if you want. Thank you.